Greetings, folks. Welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes right here on the YouTube. I post these classes every single Friday right here for you to enjoy and hopefully learn something and get inspired. And there's, of course, a comment section down below. So if you want to share something, if you have questions, if you want to add to what I present here, this very brief introduction to this topic, I would love for you to do that. You are always welcome. This week, we are talking about infinite relationships, exploring the fabric of life. What does this have to do with working with the plants? You might be asking yourself. Well, we will get to that eventually, but this is really such a cool topic, especially for those of us who are involved in the practice of clinical or traditional herbalism, because when we understand how the world is put together, how the cosmos is put together, and how you and I fit into everything, it can really change the way that we approach this work. It can really change the way that we understand the pathology of disease and illness. And maybe more importantly, it can help us understand the power that we actually hold to create more wellness and beauty and harmony in the world. So that's really where we are going today. I'm going to bounce around a little bit because there's just different aspects of this topic, different angles that I want to make sure to cover. And my hope is that as I hand you the ends of these different threads, that you will be able to weave them together into something that makes sense in your own life, however you want to apply that. So we're going to start our conversation today with a very simple, very basic question that nobody ever asks. What is the cosmos? What is the universe, right? This should be a simple one to tackle. So we'll be defining this through the perspective of animism, through the perspective of living in a world, in a universe that is populated by a vast number of different kinds of persons. Not all of them, in fact, most of them are not human persons, but all of them are sentient and wise and deserve our respect and are capable of entering into intentional connection and kinship with us. So when we look at the world, the cosmos, from these animistic perspectives, what we find time and time again is that the universe is made up of an infinite number of relationships, right? Everything that exists, you, me, the chair you're sitting on, the weather outside right now, the time of day, every event, every person, every place, everything, every idea, every action, every potential is the result of relationships, things coming together, ebb and flow, mix and match. And if we were able to somehow pan back to the perspective of the gods, for example, we would see the universe in the shape or a form of maybe a web, right? Or a tapestry, or the roots and trunk and branches of a tree. This is why these symbols have been used in traditional mythos for so long, so often, that the cosmos is like this conglomeration of various threads, warp and weft, coming together, bringing in different influences to create every moment that exists. And because of this, because the universe is made up of an infinite number of relationships, it means that everything that exists and everyone that exists or ever has existed or ever will exist is in some kind of connection with everywhere, every when, and everyone else. We're all connected. We're all linked up, right? It's impossible, and we'll kind of end our conversation later with this, but it's impossible for us to do anything without influencing the whole of things. And that's really the heart of what I want to look at today in these various different aspects of this conversation. So, moving forward, consider, if you will, even if this isn't your particular experience or your belief, maybe just hold it, try it on for this conversation, that the universe is made up of an infinite number of relationships, that everything exists because various relationships and kinships existed before that. And it's this sort of self-generating, self-propelling process that is based on sacred reciprocity and kinship. And if all of that is true, if we sort of try that on and we presuppose it, It also means that everything that happens has meaning, or as I like to say, all things omen, right? Now, before we get into this, it does not mean that you should, or that it's healthy for any of us to walk around reading into every single thing that happens. That's pointless. It's irrelevant. We don't respond to every bit of the billions amounts of data that come into our awareness at every second, and we don't need to respond to every message and every bit of omen that comes to us either. If you try to do that, you will drive yourself crazy, and it doesn't lead people to a very productive or healthy way of being, in my opinion. What is important is that when something steps on to center stage in your life, when something becomes loud or patterned or repetitive or just pulls on your heart threads in an interesting way, we don't have to look at it as random. We don't have to look at it as something happening to us. We don't have to look at it as something happening outside of us. Rather, we can say, because we are in relationship with all things, everything that happens is meaningful and has communication. What does this mean? Or what might this mean? Or what kinds of possibilities or contemplation or inspiration does this stir up in me? And so in my practice as a clinical herbalist, I'm a full time clinical herbalist. I really like to bring this perspective into my work with clients. So when somebody comes to me and says, I'm experiencing, this particular illness or this particular disease, if they've named it, or this particular set of patterns that I don't like, we spend a good amount of our assessment based on perspectives of traditional and animistic herbalism, exploring, well, what could it mean, right? What does this part of your body mean to you? What is this part of your body? If it was a symbol, what would it symbolize? What does the way that this disharmony manifested say? What could it be communicating, right? If illness is metaphor, what could this experience of illness for you be symbolizing or conveying? What story is wrapped up in it? And this is a really interesting thing as a side note to consider in clinical work, because think about the sheer number of illnesses that any one person could have, right? The number of diseases, named diseases, the number of illnesses, the number of things that could go wrong or go into a state of chaos, right? Leave their nice harmonious function and become chaotic and troublesome. It's probably close to infinite, right? So we ask the question, why does this one person, of all the disharmonies they could have, why is this the thing they have? And we take it as omen. And we tug on that string and we see, where does it lead us when we ask questions and then we continue to ask questions? Where does it lead us when we engage with that part of the body or that function or system or the person's belief around it, or when we look at the process of the body as metaphor and apply that metaphor to non-physical aspects of the person's experience? And always, guess what? We come somewhere quite profound for that individual. This is also something I think about in terms of this really beautiful Hermetic practice called Cleiden, where folks, especially people who were devotees of Hermes, the god Hermes, would go into the agora, into a busy, loud, bustling marketplace. If you're like me, that in the modern context is Trader Joe's, right? So you go in with a question in your heart, and before you walk in the door, you ask the question. You just state it plainly and simply. It doesn't need to be convoluted. It shouldn't have, um, these big open-ended possibilities, but it should be like a question you would ask an expert. Like, I'm going to ask a clear question and I want a clear answer. And you walk into that space, and uh, the old way of doing Claytonism, by the way, is that people would climb up a statue of Hermes, or find a statue of Hermes, and they would whisper their question into his ear and say, "Hey, Hermes, I have this question I'm going to ask you." And then they would sometimes block their ears and walk into the marketplace, or they would just walk into the busy marketplace and they would wait, or sort of just do what they're doing, but they would be open to the answer coming to them. Maybe they overhear somebody saying something, maybe something random, seemingly random happens, maybe uh, some kind of an omen or something happens in this busy, bustling place. And I think about that because this whole process implies the fact that all of us are so innately connected that one of us can walk into a very busy place with a question in our heart, and the connections around us will work to respond to that question. This is very, very powerful. And it's very powerful in our work with the plants because we're seeking out these connections. They already exist. We're trying to beef them up a little bit, right? We're trying to strengthen the link between us and our plant spirit allies and make it easier for those connections to be fruitful, for us to hear the wisdom and the guidance of the plants, and for the plants to hear, whatever it is that we're bringing to the table. So in a universe, in a cosmos that is made up of an infinite number of relationships, every relationship can be in some way, sometimes in a very convoluted, complicated way, and sometimes very directly, be connected to everything else. And that means that we're also sort of swimming in a world filled with wisdom. We are moving through a world that sees us, that perceives us, that knows we're there, and that responds to us being there. I think about this in terms of, maybe you are on a hike and you walk into this beautiful, dense copse of trees, and your presence in that space changes the space, right? Suddenly the birds may be quiet as they're kind of trying to figure out who you are and what your intention is. Maybe the wind kicks up in response to your presence. Maybe, obviously things on the ground are getting moved around as you move your feet through an area. This is how we move through life. And in our work with the plants, this is a very important thing to consider. So, the reason why this is so important in our work with herbs, and especially again for folks who are doing clinical work, but really any of us who are working with plants on any level, is that it is impossible for us as points in a universe made up of an infinite number of relationships, you being an entire point of an infinite number of relationships, right? Everything that happens in your body, every beat of your heart is the result of relationships taking place inside of you that lead to that beat. It's impossible for you to heal yourself, to work on your shit, and not influence the whole of things. The more we work on ourselves, the more we try to refine and hone in on our virtues, the more we try to heal and become healthy and happy and heart-centered people, the more the entire universe nudges in that direction. And you hear me talk about this all the time. That's why I wanted to do a class on this, because I realize I say this all the time. Like, our work with the plants nudges the universe further and further into states of harmony. And I get this inspiration, of course, from the philosopher Empedocles, who talked about the universe being in states of either chaos or harmony, or love or strife, right? And this is a big way of influence in how I practice herbalism and how I work with plants. So it gives us a little bit of permission to be selfish and to say, you know what? My wellness, my healing, my progress is meaningful because there's no way in a universe made of an infinite number of relationships that I can get better without bettering the whole of things. And so we think of James Lovelock's Gaia theory, for example, which at this point, I don't even know if we would call it a theory as much as we would call it a doctrine, right? That we are all akin to cells in the body of the planet Earth, right? We are differentiated, that's a thing, but it's not possible for us to improve the quality of one cell in the body or one cell in the body of the universe, you being the cell in this analogy, without the entire system becoming more healthy. If you've got a sluggish liver and you work on improving the health of your liver, that doesn't stay limited to the function of liver. Your entire being benefits. You find yourself less angry, less reactive. You're sleeping through the night. Your entire digestive system starts functioning more appropriately because the liver's happy, right? You can't um, work on yourself without working on the entire universe. You can't work on one cell without working on the whole body. You can't change anything without changing the whole of things. And I have some cells here on the slide, and I have the earth because I really love to meditate on this concept of Gaia theory. But I also have a little bonfire. This is something that if you've been around for a while, you hear me talk about this a lot too, the need fire. That if you were to imagine kindling this spiritual bonfire in your life, where does the light of that fire reach? Who's inside of it? What spaces are included in the reach of your hearth fire? What communities, what people, what places, what events, what passions, hobbies, projects are included in the light of your hearth fire, right? All of us have a fire within us that spreads out. Just like if you are camping in the woods and you light a fire, you become, you're in this sort of orb of light that reaches out around you and brings some light and some clarity to things. And eventually that fades out, and stuff outside of the light of your fire is now dark and unknown. But we think about taking care or tending to those things that are in the reach of our campfires, they're in the reach of our hearth fires. What do we have influence over? What cells are we capable of bringing wellness to? What actions and thoughts and behaviors can we constantly be trying to uplift and refine, right? And do better, and bring more beauty. Because if everybody cared this way about what was happening with the people and places and things in the light of their fire, then all places and people and things would be cared for, right? Where your fire ends, someone else's reaches. So this is very important in herbal work too, because I'm constantly trying to reinforce in my clients that the work they do for themselves is for themselves, but there's this side benefit that everyone else who is working the same pattern they're working, and everyone who shares in the light of their hearth fire, and every hearth fire in which they are included will benefit. And then sort of this cosmic level, Empedocles, things being nudged further and further into states of beauty and harmony and love. And not to approach that from this sort of watered down new age concept of like everything is love. My hope is that in this conversation I've showed you there's some very practical ways of looking at this that explain why these renewing and regenerating things that we do for ourselves, we actually do for the whole of things. And that all leads to, horror vacui, right? That nature abhors a vacuum. Nature hates dead space. That wherever we make room, something will rush in and fill it. If you take a stone out of a pond, the water will rush in and fill up the space where that stone used to be. There will be no vacuum. And similarly, it is not possible that you can heal your liver. I don't know why I'm picking on liver stuff today. You can heal your liver in a vacuum, where you heal your liver and it is only your liver that benefits from the work. This is impossible. It goes against the nature of nature, right? When you heal something, you create space for things to be done differently. You create plasticity for new patterns to be laid down as old patterns are released, and you flick a new stone into the still pool of reality and create a new ripple, right? Think about the butterfly effect, that a butterfly can beat their wings on one side of the world, and the wind gathers and gains and moves and rolls until it becomes a windstorm somewhere else, right? I don't think that's literal, but that's another kind of pop mythos that we use to, I think, intuitively nuzzle up to this idea that everything we do affects the whole of things. And it's going to be loudest the closer it is to our hearth fire. But that ripple goes out in every direction, and we don't really truly know where it stops. So, this is very important. I want to wrap up this conversation with an idea of entrainment. And entrainment is this beautiful concept. Of course, I work with heart math techniques in my practice, and entrainment shows us that whatever the strongest oscillating system is in a space, other systems around will try to entrain into the rhythm or the oscillation of that space. And so, in the body, in your body, for example, right now, your heartbeat is the strongest oscillating force in your body. So, the nature of your heartbeat, whether your heart rhythm is coherent and sine wave like, rhythmic and beautiful, or whether it's kind of chaotic and jumpy and has a lot of panic in it or chaos, that beat, that oscillating force is moving out and entraining all of the functions and spaces and cells and spaces in your body. So, similarly, when we're in a room with other people, the strongest oscillating force in the room will start to slowly entrain other people. And this is why we have certain feelings about certain spaces, right? They either feel good or they don't. And one of the unsung benefits of having deep relationship with plants is that they work on the heart, that they deepen the kind of love and kinship and reciprocity and respect and humility and virtues that we hold in our heart center. And they help us to oscillate at a rhythm that is more and more beautiful, that is more and more harmonious, that is less jostled and more fluid. And then when we walk through the world, we're carrying that nice rhythmic drumbeat, that nice rhythmic pattern that other people can then hold on to in order to find their own more harmonious rhythm. And I don't talk about this very often because I do think there's a possibility that people could take this in the wrong direction and become kind of egomaniacal about it and say, like, I walk into a room and everybody becomes like me. Everybody lines up to my drum beat. That's not it, right? These powerful oscillations are entrainment, not copycat, right? It's us stepping into spaces and choosing to do so in a way that's our best self, that is based in renewing emotions, things that feel good, things that are beautiful, thinking things and doing things that fall into our ancient ancestral traditions of sacred reciprocity, bringing to a space what is good and receiving in return what is good. So, um, this is another layer of how when we do the work for ourselves, we do the work for the whole of things. And let me just wrap this up by saying this is something I think about a lot. You know, uh, the world is in I think crisis, and I think a lot of us are desperately trying to figure out what we can do to fix the whole thing, right? Some of us are fixers. We want to fix everything. We want to figure out the right herbal tea blend to dump on every situation to make it all beautiful, to make it all right. And the reality is that we will burn out when we try to fix the whole world. So I encourage people to take stock and inventory of what is in the light of their hearth fire and start there. Fix what you can, fix and heal what you have influence over. Talk to the people that you have some influence with. Take care of your neighbors, of your immediate community, of your areas of expertise, of what you do at work, of your family, your friends. These are places where we can entrain more effectively than trying to entrain the whole world and burning out. And again, if everybody did that, all things would be cared for. This is a hidden aspect of sacred reciprocity, right? That if reciprocity is always honored, then the flow of vital force and harmony will always be there. We won't ever have to worry about things falling apart like they are now. So take care of yourself. And then when you're good, or as you have moments of prosperity in that goodness, then you can take care of another person or two, or a space or an idea in your life. This is something I'm really trying to work on personally, is noticing the things in the light of my fire, noticing the things that stand out in my life that I could do something about, and doing something about it, right? Keeping it, thinking globally, acting locally kind of thing. And also trying to be more present for the constant communication that is coming to me from the world, that everything is meaningful and omen, and really trying to be open to noticing and responding to those messages that do stand out, those voices that stand out above the drone of the crowd, and respond to them with seriousness and with respect, right? So let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much for sticking with me through another class. You can connect with me via my website, thegreenarte.com. Over on Patreon is where you can get full instant access to all of my advanced classes, plant spirit sits, courses, and the like. And of course, I have my 2 books published by Aeon in London, Spiritual Herbalism and The Green Art. Look forward to seeing you next time.